When it comes to impressive superheroes, we tend to think of the big and the bad and the bold. Generally, the cinematic version of Ant-Man isn't one that comes to mind, but underestimating this pint-sized powerhouse is a huge mistake, and it's a mistake that many of his enemies have learned the hard way. Warning, there will be spoilers ahead. Before we get started, subscribe to CBR and ring that bell to join our notification squad so you never miss a video. Without further ado, here are some times where Ant-Man surprised his enemies.
You would go subatomic.
What does that mean?
It means that you would enter a quantum realm.
Avengers Shocker. It's been confirmed that the movie takes place at the same time as Avengers Infinity War, and it features a scene that absolutely shocked audiences. During the movie, we were holding our collective breath that all of our favorite characters would make it to the end. When we arrived safely to the credits, many of us breathed a sigh of relief, which came way too soon apparently. Especially after watching the latest Avengers movie, Ant-Man and the Wasp was a welcome bit of comic relief in a turbulent time. But Marvel had one more surprise for us up their sleeve, and boy, was it a doozy. During the mid-credit scene, we saw Hank Pym, Hope, and Janet Van Dyne send our hero back to the quantum realm. Scott scooped up some quantum particles as requested and ran into a bit of an issue getting back. Hank, Hope, and Janet all disintegrated as a result of Thanos' finger snap. This wasn't the result of anything Ant-Man did, but it has to be one of the most shocking movie moments we've seen recently. It also has shocking implications for our hero, who is now apparently stuck in the quantum realm.
Why don't you wear the suit?
I spent years wearing it. It took a toll on me.
The Irredeemable Ant-Man. One guaranteed way to stun your enemies is to turn into an entirely different person. We all know that Ant-Man gets his powers from his super suit, thus anyone who puts it on could be considered Ant-Man. Fans of the movie Ant-Man likely picture Paul Rudd when thinking of the hero, but that's not entirely accurate. Before Scott Lang donned the suit, it was worn by his creator, Hank Pym. But at another point, it was worn by a low-level S.H.I.E.L.D. employee named Eric O'Grady. To give you an idea of how bad this guy was, he was in a comic titled The Irredeemable Ant-Man. O'Grady and his friend, Chris McCarthy, were supposed to be guarding Pym's lab, but the former wound up knocking the scientist unconscious at one point. McCarthy ended up wearing the Ant-Man suit and seemed to disappear. Good friend O'Grady used this opportunity to hit on his friend's girlfriend. That's nice. During an attack by Hydra, McCarthy lost his life, and O'Grady decided to honor his friend's memory in a meaningful way. Just kidding. He ripped off the Ant-Man suit and kept it for himself. It's no surprise that Marvel decided to bring the much more pleasant Scott Lang Ant-Man to the screen.
Seriously, Hank, you know what? I give up. I try and try with you, but it's never good enough.
Ant-Man versus the Wasp. No, we didn't get the movie title wrong. We know that at one time Hank Pym was Ant-Man and his wife, Janet Van Dyne, was the Wasp. If there's one thing we love, it's superheroes with a tragic backstory and complicated emotions. Usually the good outweighs the bad and we can enjoy rooting for the hero, but with Hank Pym, things got incredibly dark. Although he's a brilliant man, his life has been marred by failure. He's always showed up to battle, but wasn't the one who ended up saving the day. Not only did he struggle with being a superhero and his experiments, but things weren't always happy at home with Janet. In the comics, we see the two had a complicated relationship to say the least. There was tons of fighting with one another, and everyone was shocked when Pym crossed the line and went from using words to using his fists on Janet. Not only did he slap his wife, but he clearly delighted in her suffering. Not only is this extremely surprising to fans of the lighthearted Marvel Ant-Man movies, but it was shocking to pretty much everyone at the time. It's startling when a convicted felon like Scott Lang is the least controversial choice to portray Ant-Man on the big screen. So many damaged Ant-Men.
Who killed Hank?
So? Pym was the weak link in your little club. You're better off without him.
Yellowjacket. Struggling with mental illness is no joke. That's the situation that Hank Pym found himself in as he struggled with the loss of his first wife, Maria Trovaya. As he desperately tried to cope with the tragedy, he began exhibiting startling erratic behaviors and alternate personas to cope with his mental anguish. In the movie Ant-Man, we see Pym's protege Darren Cross create a Yellowjacket suit, but in the comics, it's Pym who comes up with Yellowjacket. He develops Yellowjacket as an alter ego, hoping this would help him deal with his issues. However, as you've probably guessed by now, turning yourself into a different insect-based super being isn't the way of dealing with your issues. There was even a time when he took on his wife's superhero persona and became the Wasp. This was supposed to honor her memory and help Pym deal with his issues, but in reality it was just really strange and awkward for everyone. We get that facing your issues is easier said than done, but we definitely don't recommend the Pym method of dealing with things.
For my face is the last you shall ever see. I am Doom.
Dr. Doom. One of the most defining aspects of Scott Lang's character is the love he has for his daughter, Cassie Lang. In the comic books, Cassie discovers she's actually managed to absorb some Pym particles. This means that much like her father, she can shrink and grow at will. Having discovered these powers, she quickly joined up with the Young Avengers, going by the moniker Stature. She and her friends decided to travel back in time in an effort to prevent Scarlet Witch from disassembling the Avengers. This proved to be far beyond the scope of their collective powers, and they were unable to stop Scarlet Witch. However, the silver lining to this adventure was that they managed to save Scott Lang's life. He returned with the Young Avengers to present day and helped them engage in a fight with the dreaded Dr. Doom. Tragically, his beloved daughter Cassie didn't survive the fight. During this epic battle, it was revealed that Scott had learned how to utilize Pym particles in order to give himself super strength. Busting out a brand new superpower mid-battle is always most surprising and exciting, and it let Scott overpower Dr. Doom. At this point, we were expecting Scott to take his vengeance, but even more shocking than his power was that the fact that he let Doom live. He believed that mercy was the fate Cassie would have chosen in that situation.
Daddy! I love you so much.
I love you too.
Who's your daddy now? Following the end of Civil War, Stature was one of the heroes who gave in and complied with regulations. When she went to register, she ran into none other than the Irredeemable Ant-Man, Eric O'Grady. In keeping with his pleasant character, he was busy slandering her late father, Scott Lang. Instead of deciding to hold his tongue, Ant-Man got into a heated fight with Cassie. Rather than trying to best her during a straight-up battle, he resorted to distracting her by making her think she'd stepped on a fellow hero. O'Grady sucker punched her while screaming, "Who's your daddy now?" Yeah, we think that Irredeemable is a pretty accurate description of this guy.
Reinforced shield level steel? Don't mind if I do.
Absorbing Man. In terms of nicknames, it's really hard to get behind a guy called Absorbing Man. In fact, his real name, Crusher Creel, is undeniably cooler. At one point, it seemed like the end of the Avengers had finally come because of the dastardly actions of the Masters of Evil. They gained control of the Avengers Mansion and captured the majority of the Avengers. In fact, at one point, the only Avenger still in action was the Wasp. She was visiting a grievously injured Hercules in the hospital when Scott Lang decided to stop by. The pair end up having to face off against Absorbing Man. Now, keep in mind that at this point, Absorbing Man had taken out nearly all of the Avengers, making his downfall even more surprising. Wasp managed to temporarily strip Absorbing Man of his powers, at which point the two heroes were able to overpower him.
Something just flew in me!
Vision Quest. We'll admit that we've been a bit hard on the Hank Pym version of Ant-Man. Don't get us wrong, he's done some pretty horrific things. But once in a while, he did manage to get the whole hero thing right. There was a time in the comics when Vision was in danger, and only Ant-Man was able to save him. It was during the Kree-Skrull War, and Vision ended up on the wrong side of some Skrulls. He collapsed in dire straits, and his fellow Avengers were desperate to save him. Thankfully, Hank Pym was there, and was quick to don his Ant-Man suit and leap into action. Heading inside an android and fixing up his broken insides is pretty much the perfect task for Ant-Man. He had to contend with Vision's internal defense systems and made some startling discoveries about his hardware. This Hank Pym storyline had a happy ending, at least for Vision, who was back to normal in no time.
Whispering, laughing, Egghead. Everyone calling me Egghead behind my back.
Betrayal. In the movie Ant-Man and the Wasp, we learn that Ava's father, Elias Starr, has betrayed Hank Pym. Pym claims that Starr stole some of the plans for the Quantum Tunnel, but doesn't reveal his frankly embarrassing nickname from the comic books. Comic fans remember Elias Starr as Egghead, frequent nemesis of Ant-Man. During one of his many dark periods of Pym's life, he had been divorced by his wife and kicked out of the Avengers. This led to some serious financial trouble, and he shocked Egghead by willingly collaborating with him in order to make some money. Unsurprisingly, teaming up with a nemesis in order to perpetrate evil schemes and earn some quick cash didn't work out very well for Ant-Man. Soon, Egghead was framing Pym for treason, convincing the world that he was a criminal. Meanwhile, Pym was forced to work for Egghead to create a cure for aging. But instead of following instructions, classic Pym created a massive weapon instead of what he was supposed to be working on. After going toe-to-toe with Ant-Man so many times, it's actually pretty shocking that Egghead didn't see this coming from a mile away. Learn your lesson, Egghead, come on.
Buckled in?
Yeah. No, I'm good. I'm good, Arrow Guy. Let's go, let's go!
Carnival games. When you're a superhero, nothing is ever just fun and games. During a less prestigious time in his career, Hawkeye worked for a carnival, which was now in need of his assistance. It had been taken over by Taskmaster, but before long, Hawkeye and Ant-Man were forced to team up when it's clear that there's evil afoot. It was fortuitous timing for sure, and the two heroes got to work, taking down Taskmaster and his men. Eventually, it was revealed that the human cannonball was actually a mass of explosives that would have claimed the lives of everyone in attendance. Saving the day from this threat was pretty tricky to say the least. Hawkeye placed Ant-Man on an arrow and launched it at the massive explosives. Thankfully, Scott was able to disarm the bomb just in the nick of time, creating a classic comic book moment.
Oh man, I thought it was a water truck.
There you have it. How do you feel about the way Ant-Man is portrayed in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Do you think it's best to stick with Scott Lang, or should audience get to see all the different sides of Ant-Man? Let us know in the comments section below, and subscribe to CBR to stay up to date with all our awesome videos. Thanks for watching.